But we begin tonight with a message to Christian nationalist extremists. We, the people, will never agree to your Handmaid's Tale vision of America, ever. But that clearly won't stop them from trying, which leads us to the unholy alliance between Donald Trump and Christian nationalists. On Monday, a day before the Arizona Supreme Court decided to drag women back in time, specifically to the 19th century, Arizona Republican State Senator Anthony Kern invited an anti-abortion prayer group to the Senate floor. Seen in a video filmed by an anonymous attendee, Kern led the group through a prayer and speaking in tongues as they knelt over the state seal.
Let it be so, Father God. Let it be so. Let it be so. Lord, right now we just release the presence of the Lord in the Senate chamber. We just release the hovering glory of God Almighty in the Senate chamber.
I'll note that Senator Kern also happens to be under investigation for falsely claiming to be a legitimate Arizona elector for Donald Trump back in 2020. Now, having grown up in the church myself, I clearly have no problem with these people's faith. You can believe and worship however you want. But that display belongs in church, not in a Senate chamber. In fact, according to the third president of the United States, one Thomas Jefferson, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution was written to create a wall of separation between church and state. And before the right-wing media trolls attack me, I would love for them to ask the state senator, how he would feel about a Muslim prayer group doing the exact same thing on the Senate floor. Since Donald Trump's election, the separation of church and state is crumbling all around us under the guise of religious freedom. And yesterday was a brutal reminder of that reality, set in motion by 6 U.S. Supreme Court justices who are dogmatic advocates for advancing their particular version of Christianity in the public square and turning it into law. The Arizona Supreme Court picked up the baton and delivered a punch in the gut to women in their state who are rightly angry and frustrated.
It's such an archaic law created by men to control women's bodies, and it's not for the state to say. It's not for anyone to say.
I feel like the Supreme Court has started to follow like that Christian, like fundamentalist Christian side of not getting abortions.
It should be out of the government's control. I feel like it's women's bodies and they should be able to do whatever they want with their own bodies, and like no one should be able to control what I want to do.
I would say I don't see a very clear separation of church and state in this country, just because I see way too many people and way too many politicians mostly that are pointing to their own religious beliefs as their reasoning as to why they don't want to have abortions.
Earlier today, Arizona Democrats took to the very same floor where Republican Senator Kern prayed for the end of women's bodily autonomy to demand that it be restored and that the legislature repeal the 1864 law, while shouting shame at their Republican colleagues who thwarted attempts to roll back that law. The stark reality is that women don't want this. Democrats don't want this. Hell, most Republican and independent voters don't want this. But that's exactly what they are getting because a majority of state legislatures, which write the laws for all of us, are dominated by men.
Half of the population basically are women, and only 1/3 of legislators are women. And so you look in state after state where they're passing these abortion bans, and the majority of the legislators doing it are men, telling women what to do with their body. And I've kind of had it with that.
In all of the 50 state legislatures, as the vice president said, only 31% are women. But if you ask Trump, he says it's the will of the people to jail physicians, punish women, and he makes it clear whose will it is.
You're getting the will of the people. It's been pretty amazing when you think. I predict November 5th, the most important day in the history of our country, and it's going to be Christian Visibility Day. Christian Visibility Day. Christians are going to come out and they're going to vote like never before.
Which is why men like Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, and others accuse women of being hysterical, emotional, and unworthy of equal rights, while they vociferously support Trump.
He wants to say cultural issues as a code word for rube, white, rural, Christian, heterosexual, male, nationalists, that are just focused on their wives being too mouthy, sir?
Yeah. Well, look, let's just be frank. Women have become too mouthy.
Birth control really screws up female brains, by the way. Every single one of you need to make sure that your loved ones are not on birth control. It increases depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. It creates very angry and bitter young ladies.
Will women have the right to vote tomorrow if you wave that magic Christian wand?
No.
Okay, why not? I want to get into why not. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Because if we had a Christian nation tomorrow and women did have the right to vote, we would not have a Christian nation within 50 years.
We are witnessing an alliance of Christian nationalists, anti-feminists, and fascists working together to make sure they maintain control over us all under his eye. Joining me now is Isaac Arnsdorf, national political reporter for The Washington Post and author of Finish What We Started, the MAGA movement's ground war to end democracy, and NPR national political correspondent Sarah McCammon, who has reported on the growing political power of the religious right and is the author of The Ex-Evangelicals, Loving, Living, and Leaving the White Evangelical Church. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to start with you at the table here, Isaac. This is Steve Bannon's vision, a Christian nationalist America run by white, heterosexual, so-called Christian men, because I'm a Christian. That ain't Christianity.
Well, keep in mind, Bannon himself grew up in a Catholic military school where he learned about history as a clash of civilizations between the Christian West and the Muslim world. A huge part of his rise back when it was Breitbart and the alt-right, and also a big part of Trump's rise, was this fear of Islamic extremist terrorism, and Christianity was core to that. But fundamentally, the MAGA movement, as Bannon conceives it, is nationalist, and Christian nationalism is a strand of that. It's not the only form of it, but certainly, I mean, when I visited him in his office doing some reporting for my book, he's surrounded by books, and one of them out there on the table was called The Case for Christian Nationalism.
Right, and of course, Camp of the Saints and all of that sort of other stuff, too. I mean, I didn't even realize that Mark Burnett, I am this week old in realizing Mark Burnett is an evangelical Christian. His wife was on was on a TV show where she, was sort of playing into that as well. So is the idea that what they think they're going to do, as he keeps saying, deconstruct the administrative state, essentially break the government at the federal and state level and put their people in charge, and then voila, it doesn't matter what women think or what minorities think. They will be ruled by this small group of men.
Bannon's idea is that if you redefine the two-party system as a populist, right-of-center, nationalist party called the Republicans versus what he would call a globalist, elitist, liberal party, then he thinks that that is the recipe for the Republican Party to rule for 50 or 100 years.
Let's bring you in, Sarah, because what they're using to get more ordinary people to sign on to this is what they're calling Christianity, white evangelicalism. And, you and I were just together yesterday at Yale, and we happened to know that there was a piece put out by a group of actual evangelical Christians saying, no, this is not evangelicalism, and saying religious nationalism is not part of what we are. That man, Bishop Barber, is an evangelical. But this particular strain of white evangelical Christianity, how has it become so powerful?
Well, I think you have to look back many decades to both the rhetoric that has been coming from evangelical leaders, going back to, the moral majority in the late 70s, early 80s, and the idea that has been infused into much of the white evangelical subculture that America is and should be and always was a Christian nation, that Christianity is central to American identity and it should be prioritized in the government and across the culture, and that without it, everything will sort of fall apart. And this is rhetoric that, I heard in my Christian schools growing up, and it's rhetoric that I think many people have heard from their pulpits, and increasingly so. Now, you can talk about what is the relationship between faith and politics. And of course, as you were saying, many people's values infuse their politics. That's nothing new. But this is an idea of sort of privileging Christianity above all other faiths. And I want to be clear, not all evangelicals believe in this. Right. But when you look at data, at polling data, white evangelicals do express stronger Christian nationalistic sentiments than other groups. And we hear Trump speaking to that. When he holds up the God Bless the USA Bible and talks about Christianity under siege, he's tapping into that idea.
And I mean, they're also doing this at a time when we still have not gotten a lot of women into state legislatures. I'm just going to put up the map. Women as a percentage of state legislatures, you know, it's a third nationwide. The yellow is where it's 20% or so. The light orange is where it's 20 to 40%. The red is where it's 60%, and only Nevada is red. You know, we're talking about a country in which women don't have a lot of power. Talk about the women who, despite that, are siding with these Christian nationalist men, because there are a handful of women going along with this.
I think it's more than a handful. I mean, much of the anti-abortion movement is led by women. We saw, at least in 2016, and I'd have to check the data for 2020, but over half of white women in 2016 voted for Trump. Yep. I'm not saying they're all Christian nationalists, but I don't think it's a small number of women. And, you know, you could talk about the reasons for that. But the bottom line is that women are underrepresented in American politics today. And but you know, some of the women leading these movements are people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a self-described Christian nationalist. So I think it depends on the woman, and it depends on the part of the country that you're talking about. But you know, you make a good point. Women remain underrepresented, and that may be why, you know, but at the same time, we've also seen work by the religious right for many, many years and the Republican Party to build infrastructure in state legislatures. So many of the state legislatures don't represent the will of the people, or you know, even in red states, we've seen some of these ballot initiatives over in the last couple of years. Even in red states, you have voters pushing back against efforts to restrict abortion rights. The electorate may be conservative and people may oppose abortion, but not to the degree that their state lawmakers are enacting in legislation.
Yeah, and Marjorie Taylor Greene and also Lauren Boebert, two divorcees. So I'm not sure that they're living their faith, because this group tends to not believe in no-fault divorce, but they seem to have taken advantage of it.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.